What's up guys? Today's Thursday, so that means we have another Tech Thursday all lined up and ready to go. And for today's installment, I'm going to be showing you guys how to assemble a brand new BMX bike straight out of the box. I'm going to give you guys all the essential steps you'll need, all the tools necessary, and any tip that I have that'll make it go by a lot quicker. So let's get to it. So for today, we're going to be assembling a 2016 Fly Bikes Proton model. And according to the box, all you're going to need are a 6mm Allen wrench, a 17mm wrench, and they don't stipulate this, but an air pump. So the only things I'm going to be using are this Joe Blow air pump, this Shadow multi-tool, and a pair of dikes to cut the box open and to remove some of the packaging. Alright, so if you've never assembled a complete bike before, the first thing you want to do is obviously open the box. But first you got to remove these protecting seals, so I just usually cut them right off. And then obviously open it up. Once you pull the bike out of the box, you'll see that it comes with a lot of protective packaging, so that's why these come in handy, because you can get rid of all these zip ties and all this padding and all this paper and tape. So I don't want to bore you guys with all this unpackaging, so I'm going to make a quick montage of this, so bear with me. So once all the packaging is off the bike, I personally like to use bike stands, so I'm going to put it up on here to save my back a little bit. But for you guys, you're fine to do it on carpeting or hardwood floor, or like our shop floor is a little beat up from people banging their bikes on it. So you want to be careful because you could damage your floor. So keep that in mind. Alright, so now that we have the bike on the stand, the first thing I like to do is assemble the handlebars. And the reason for that is just because they're kind of hanging there. Because this bike does have brakes, so I like to get that on there and get out of the way. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using the Shadow tool, so you just got to disassemble this bad boy. Get the 6 out of here. Put it on the socket. And you're ready to rock. Alright, so using our 6mm Allen key, we're going to remove all the bolts on the front of the stem, and then we're going to remove the faceplate so we can install the handlebars. Alright, so now that all the bolts are off, we're able to remove the faceplate and then assemble the handlebars. Alright, so then all you have to do is set the bars. You want the knurling to be as centered as possible. You want to put the faceplate on, and it's alright to have the bars set all the way down. You're not going to exactly tighten it yet. We're just going to mock it all up. Again, you want very little or no knurling to show up on each side of the stem. So as you can see, this stem is wide enough to cover both sides of the knurling. And then, while the stem is still loose, you want to lightly put the handlebars into position. And then you're ready to tighten it up. Like I mentioned before, you're going to want to tighten this in an X pattern, not exactly in clockwise or counterclockwise manner. And the reason for that is when you do it in a square technique, what you'll do is you'll put more pressure on one than the other. But if you do it in the X pattern, it'll disperse the pressure evenly. So since I tightened up the upper left, I'm going to do the bottom right, followed by the upper right. And you want to just get these snug again. You don't want to over tighten any of these. You want to make sure it's all even. And now the bottom left. So you want to tighten the bolts up until they're nice and snug. And then you want to make sure that they're properly aligned. So as you can see, the bottom spacing is just as equal as the top spacing. So next you want to crank it down. You don't want to use all your strength, but you want to get them nice and tight. Alright, so the handlebars are all set. I usually set them up nice and straight, and then once you actually ride the bike, you can move them forward or backward as you so please. Next up, we're going to get the seat ready to go. So this bike comes with a tripod seat that's already assembled, so all you really have to do is drop it in the frame at the set height you want. Usually I like to run my seat with about a 2-finger rise, so that should look about right. So Fly Bikes stated that all you need is a 6mm Allen, but this is actually a 5mm, so we'll get that in there, get her nice and snug. Be careful not to over tighten this bolt because these are pretty brittle and they tend to snap, so you just want them to get them nice and snug. Looks very nice. So next up, we got the front wheel. We want to make sure all the spacers are up against the actual bolt. And you want the wheel to be perfectly centered. Usually you can check this distance by placing your index finger and seeing how much space is on each side, or you can just kind of like take a look at it and you'll see that it's pretty centered. All right, so now we have it nice and centered. You're ready to tighten it down. Nothing too special about this, righty-tighty. Before throwing this box away, you always want to make sure that you didn't leave anything behind. Oftentimes you'll find this little box that has the pedals, reflectors, seat, brakes, and other small components. Also, you'll find the chain protector, but who needs one of those? All right, open her up, get your pedals, and you're ready to install these last pieces. So pedals can be tricky sometimes, but if you look really closely, you'll see the etchings of the L and the R for left and right. And when you're putting these guys on, you want to apply a little bit of grease. And it's really important that you very gently make sure the threads go in smoothly before you really start cranking them down. So just give it a few finger turns. And remember, for cranks, the left pedal is usually counter thread. So that means that lefty is actually tighty. For the right one, it's actually normal, so righty-tighty. But the cool thing is that if you're actually holding onto the cranks, you can pedal backwards and that'll tighten them all up. So again, I recommend finger tightening them first just to make sure that you don't strip out the threads when you put them uneven, because that'll counter thread them and that's a catastrophe that you don't want to deal with. So we use a 15mm pedal wrench here and tighten it upwards because it's going to the left, so lefty-tighty. And then for the right pedal, same thing, upwards, righty-tighty. All right, she's ready. All right, so now you have the seat, pedals, bars, and wheels on. Then all you gotta do is pump her up. So usually I pump up these bikes anywhere between 50 to 60 PSI. These tires are usually rated for a lot more, but I like to keep it at a comfortable pressure. All right, so now you have the bike all assembled. The last things you wanna do are cross-check everything to make sure everything's nice and tight, and the brakes. Sometimes the brakes don't come in dialed right out of the box, so we gotta do a little bit of fine tuning, so I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. So most of the 2016 complete bikes come with 990 brakes, and the 990 comes from the post that comes out of the frame. These are oftentimes removable, and then the brake sits on the post and the spring is inside the actual brake, and it's all tied down by this 5mm bolt here. And then this is pulled on by a straddle cable, which this Fly model has a really stiff one that's almost like as thick as a spoke. And then lastly, the straddle. So then after the straddle, we have the brake cable that is held here by a barrel adjuster. And this barrel adjuster will allow you to do the fine tuning to get your brakes nice and dialed. So as you can see here, brakes are symmetrical. Whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right. So we're gonna try and dial these in, see why they weren't pulling evenly. So as I was saying earlier, this is a straddle cable, but on this Fly, this is actually the spring changer brake system. So what that does is that this straddle is actually the spring. So these brakes don't actually have the springs on the inside. So what you have to do is pull this apart further to add more tension so I can separate the brakes easier. Then we just kind of clamp it on this side, get it on the straddle, and then assemble it back together. And that should give it proper spring. So if you need to do any finer tuning, I recommend loosening or tightening the actual straddle. And you do that using a 5/32 of an inch Allen key. And that'll give you the proper distance so that the actual brake pads aren't being pulled too closely or aren't too far from the rim. All right, so once you've adjusted the barrel, you made sure that the spring, whether it's on the straddle or inside the brakes, have enough tension. The last thing you wanna do is make sure your brake pads are towed in. And what that means is that the front part of the brake pad is actually closer to the rim than the back part. And what that does is as the rim is spinning and the brakes actually stop, then the pad will touch first at the beginning and then the rest of the brake pad will hit the surface of the rim, and that'll make for a smoother and tighter braking power. All right, so upon further inspection, I see that the stem is slightly crooked, so all you gotta do is loosen the back bolts on the actual stem. and straighten out that steer tube so that the stem and wheel align properly. All right, so now that the back of the stem or the compression of it is actually loose, you can actually just nudge the wheel a couple times until you get the stem and front tire nice and straight. So now all you gotta do is tighten these back up and you should be good to go. Again, no need to crazily crank it, just kind of like evenly tighten each side, back and forth. About a quarter spin here, another quarter spin there. And you're solid. All right, another thing I noticed is that the chain came a little too tight for my liking, so I'm gonna loosen up the back wheel. And how you do that is using the 17, obviously. Usually I like to loosen up the drive side bolt because that'll allow me to set the parameter of how loose or tight I want the chain. So usually if you loosen up that drive side and you squeeze the chain a little bit, that'll get a little closer. You don't want to overdo it when you're actually squeezing the chain, because when you loosen up the other side, that's also going to help bring the rim forward and it'll make the chain even more loose. Now that I loosened the non-drive side bolt and move the wheel slightly forward, I can come back and see how loose the chain is, which is a little more loose than I wanted. So I can go back and tighten up this side, and that'll give me the proper adjustment. So give it a little more squeeze, tighten her down while squeezing, and then you're ready to let go and crank it down, and you should be good to go. Another way you can do this is after you loosen up the bolt, you can actually push the tire or the rim with your thumb as you're cranking down the bolt. This will allow you to move the wheel either left or right to give the chain more tightness, or if you want to actually move the wheel over slightly. Once you have the initial tightness, then you can just crank it down. And it looks like she's dialed, and Tony the cat is pretty hyped on her, right? Take that as a yes. And it's just as simple as that. For those of you guys that didn't know how to build up a BMX bike, I hope you guys enjoyed that. For those of you guys that did, I hope you guys learned something. I'm sure there's something you can pick up, right? Anyhow, hope you guys do enjoy this for real. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And tune in next week when I show you guys how to bunny hop over a fat cat named Tony. And then tune in on Thursday for Tech Thursday when I show you how to bury said cat in case you don't make it. So, signing out. Peace out.